The Great Sibling Swindle, Part 2, Agatha's School of Scamming and Sophistication. After the successful, and highly profitable, divorce from Mr. Gregory, Jonas and Sophie thought they'd reached the peak of their scamming game. That is, until Madame Agatha, the self-proclaimed queen of scams, entered their lives. Now, with a new partner in crime and the promise of even bigger payouts, the two found themselves enrolled in the most unconventional school ever, Agatha's School of Scamming and Sophistication. Agatha strutted into the mansion wearing a leopard print coat and sunglasses so large they practically covered her whole face. She looked like Cruella de Vil, if Cruella was really into scamming wealthy men out of their fortunes. "Listen up, rookies," she said, whipping off her glasses dramatically. "First rule of the con: distraction. You two have been amateurs. I mean, pretending to be siblings. Cute, but predictable. You've got to dazzle them. Confuse them. Make them think you're something they desperately need." Sophie, sipping her third mimosa of the morning, raised an eyebrow. "Like a therapist?" Agatha rolled her eyes. "No, darling, like a luxury yacht salesman, or an exotic animal trainer, or," she paused, eyeing Jonas, "maybe you can pretend to be an eccentric art dealer with a tragic backstory." Jonas blinked. "An art dealer? I barely know what a painting looks like." Agatha slapped him on the back. "That's the beauty of it. You don't have to know anything. The more clueless you seem, the more they'll believe you. Wealthy people love nonsense. They'll pay extra for it." Sophie giggled. "So, we just talk gibberish?" "Exactly," Agatha said, her eyes gleaming. "Throw in words like postmodernism, ethereal brush strokes, and deconstructive minimalism. They'll lap it up like it's fine wine." Jonas scratched his head. "I thought rich people liked actual art." Agatha snorted. "Sweetie, rich people wouldn't know real art if it hit them in the face. They just want to seem cultured. You give them what they want: gibberish and a sad story about how your great-uncle lost a fortune in the great art auction crash of 1999. Jonas scribbled in a notebook. "Gibberish plus tragic fake story equals $. The following week, Agatha showed up at the mansion carrying a massive suitcase. "You two are going to need a makeover," she declared, throwing open the suitcase to reveal a collection of wigs, fake mustaches, monocles, and glittering outfits that looked like they'd been stolen from Elton John's closet. Sophie reached for a blonde wig that looked like it had been struck by lightning. Are we robbing rich people or starring in a Broadway musical?" Agatha gave her a firm look. "This is how the pros do it. You need to look like someone who knows people who own private islands." Sophie held up a sparkly jacket that was blindingly bright. "I'm supposed to scam someone while looking like a disco ball?" "Absolutely," Agatha said with a grin. "You'll be impossible to forget, and that's the point. No one scams better than a person who looks like they just walked off a runway from the future." Jonas, meanwhile, was struggling to put on a fake mustache. "Why does this thing smell like glue?" "Because it is glue, darling," Agatha said, shaking her head. "Now, let's see if we can pass you off as an international wine connoisseur. We're going to target a vineyard owner next." "Wine connoisseur," Jonas mumbled through the mustache. "I don't even drink wine. It tastes like fancy grape juice." "Perfect," Agatha said, clapping her hands. "We'll use that. You're an eccentric wine connoisseur who only drinks grape juice because wine is too mainstream. Now, remember, be outrageous. The bigger the lie, the more they'll believe it." It was now time for Agatha's most important lesson, the long con. She sipped her martini, eyeing Jonas and Sophie like they were clueless children learning how to ride a bike for the first time. "The problem with your Mr. Gregory scam," Agatha began, "was that you cut and run too soon. You could have bled him dry. If you're going to marry rich and divorce richer, you need to play the long game." Sophie frowned. "We were married for 6 months. That's not long enough." Agatha scoffed. 6 months. Darling, I was married to my 4th husband for 4 years, and I didn't even know his first name until year 3. That's how you do it." Jonas raised an eyebrow. 4 years. How did you keep up the act for that long?" "Easy," Agatha said, swirling her drink. "I had a decoy." Agatha. Sophie leaned forward. "A decoy?" Agatha smirked. "Whenever I got bored or had to, run a side scam, I'd hire an actress to pretend to be me. The rich fool never noticed." He just thought I had grown as a person. Jonas's eyes widened. That's genius. Agatha grinned. The key is commitment. You have to commit to the character. If you're a vineyard heiress with a secret passion for competitive knitting, then you better learn how to knit and drink wine while complaining about the burden of wealth. Sophie leaned back, amazed. You are terrifyingly good at this. Agatha smiled sweetly. I know. The first test. The Battle of the Buffoons. Now fully equipped with their new personas, Jonas and Sophie were ready for their first test under Agatha's guidance. Their target. Bernard Beaumont, a wealthy oil tycoon with an ego the size of his offshore accounts and a brain the size of a peanut. Sophie was to pose as a countess from an obscure European country, while Jonas became a Hollywood producer looking for investors in his latest, groundbreaking film. A documentary about clouds, obviously. The plan was simple. Dazzle Bernard with nonsense until he handed over a check big enough to fund their luxury lifestyle for the next year. Agatha watched from a distance as Sophie, wearing an enormous fur coat despite the warm weather, walked up to Bernard at the charity gala. Oh, darling, she purred in a ridiculous accent, I simply must tell you about my estate in the Alps. It's so lonely up there. Just me and my 16 dogs. Bernard's eyes widened. The Alps, you say? Fancy that. I've always wanted to invest in, dogs. Sophie giggled. Oh, how fabulous. Perhaps you could sponsor my new pet spa for millionaire dogs. It's called Paws and Privilege. Meanwhile, Jonas sidled up to Bernard with his fake mustache slightly crooked. Listen here, old sport, he said, doing his best bad British accent, despite the fact Bernard was Texan. I've got an opportunity for you. It's a film. About clouds. Clouds? Bernard asked, looking confused. Ah, but these aren't ordinary clouds, my good man, Jonas continued, his mustache wiggling dangerously. They're postmodern clouds, with existential overtones. Very avant-garde. You wouldn't understand. Bernard blinked, clearly too embarrassed to admit he had no idea what was happening. Well, I suppose I could invest a little. By the end of the night, Bernard had written them a check large enough to cover their next 3 months of lavish living. As they exited the gala, Agatha clapped her hands, a satisfied smirk on her face. Well done, my little swindlers. You're finally learning. After months of training under Agatha's ruthless yet hilarious guidance, Jonas and Sophie were ready for their final exam, pulling off the ultimate heist at Lumaville's annual charity gala. The plan was audacious. They would convince the entire room of rich socialites that Jonas was an eccentric prince in exile from a small, made-up country that had just discovered oil reserves, while Sophie posed as his long-lost twin sister, the Duchess of dubious titles. Agatha, naturally, would play their mysterious aunt with an eye patch and a questionable backstory involving pirate treasure. As the night unfolded, the trio worked the room, spinning tales so outrageous that even the most skeptical of the wealthy fell for it. By the end of the night, they had secured investments from half the town, and Jonas had somehow been made the honorary mayor of Lumaville. Agatha toasted them as they counted their profits, her eyes twinkling with mischief. You've graduated, she said with pride. You're no longer amateurs. You're con artists. Jonas and Sophie clinked glasses.